Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 3. Welcome to our presentation. I am Suci Aminah. Let me introduce ourselves. The first one, me, Suci Aminah. The second, Siti Zulpa Adawiyah. Third, Yardila. Fourth, Yunia Sapitri. And the last one, Ranico. Today, we will continue our material about material for beginners. Material is current convention, content. I accept that there would be some topic overlap between this book, but I was surprised at how many of the same topics appeared in the books. New Interchange and Atlas even shared the same unit title, Do You Like Jazz? For their units on music, movies, and entertainment, not counting the review units. Atlas has 12 units and all except one of its topics are replicated in New Interchange 16 units. Because of head starts, especially grammatically focused, it has a couple of unit topics that New Interchange does not include, like and dislike and object and adjective. And it also features a unit on season and month. But its 9 other themes are covered in New Interchange. New Interchange, by the way, is the most recent edition of Interchange, which was first published in 1990. And its only topic change is the addition of units 16 table. This material have a table, is a list of Atlas, New Interchange, and Head Start topic. You can read in the book. The topics used in this course book include vocabulary and function that are potentially useful to language learners from any culture. They can be especially useful to those learners who need quick exposure to survival language skills. However, a large part of the problem with this established beginner course book and EFL or ESL textbooks in general is that there is no real choice between them. What happens to the learner who repeat a course at this level or is returning to the level after an absence from language learning? Add to this the fact that course books at higher levels mostly repeat the same topics. In this situation, teachers do not have much choice but to design another lesson around your family or your leisure activities. When I set out to look for materials that could provide my learners with exposure and alternative, more engaging topics, I am forced to turn to supplementary materials or spend time I do not have creating my own material. No publisher, teacher, researcher, or material reader would deny that the potential for language acquisition is enhanced when language input is relevant, significant, silent, engaging, and of interest to the learner. The topics presented in Head Start, New Interchange, and Atlas may fulfill these criteria the first time round for some learners, but the second and third presentation of the same topics must significantly diminish any potential for acquisition to take place. Publishers research their target markets and say this is what the teachers want. And they are right. I also believe, however, that teachers and learners want this and more. They want topics that allow for imagination, creation, and effective engagement, as well as topics that cover everyday survival language. There is a place and need for at least one course book that covers completely different topics and themes. A beginner course book manuscript My colleague Chris Mares and I are currently developing for a US publisher includes unit topics such as strengths, days, the way we see things, and the unexpected. And the feedback we had from the 6 reviewers to the publisher surveyed was encouraging. The topics seem very interesting. The topic sounds interesting. This unit is entitled Strange Days. I found the unit itself quite strange. I do not fully understand some of the title. I would be interested in learning more about the topic used in the text are a bit usual. The topics listed in the prospectus seem interesting. I think it is difficult to say what will be interesting to students, but as long as the topics are interesting to the teacher, she will be more likely to make them interesting for the students. Publishers concur with making course book content and activities transparent and easy to use and understandable, but teachers know better than anyone that the language and activities need to be consistently engaging in order for the learner to pay attention and to create the condition for acquisition to take place.
Okay, I will continue to explain the next material. It's about approach and methodology. There are 3 examples of the books with its approach and methodology. First, Head Start. Second, New Interchange, and third, Atlas. In Head Start, half of the exercise only require the learner to listen and repeat, and the remaining exercise are mostly controlled practice. And then in New Interchange, just like Head Start, more than half of the exercises are listen and repeat, or read and practice activities. And the tests are tightly controlled comprehension, questions or discussions with predetermined questions and answers. Meanwhile, in Atlas, the exercises provided in a skillful presentation. The learners are given opportunities to contribute their own ideas. The language practice in Atlas more complex and longer than Head Start, because Head Start's activities mostly practice short piece of simply dialogue and text. It can be said that activities in Atlas would be less controlled and allow for learner creativity, instead of the listen and repeat exercises found in Head Start. Rather than a behavioral approach to learning, where learners mimic the teacher focusing on form and accuracy, Atlas would emphasize a wide, varied, and engaging input focusing on meaning, fluency, and exposures. So we can conclude that almost half of the first unit's activity in book should be consist either listen and repeat, read and repeat, or write and practice exercises. And the rest test comprehension, test to see if the learner can distinguish between different sounds, and all exercises have right and wrong answers. Although each book differs in degree, they all follow a behavioral approach to language learning. Next, oral productions. In oral productions, what should teacher do? Of course, teach the learners to speak. So here we use rote learning as the techniques. What is rote learning? It is memorization technique based on repetition. So the beginner learners do not actually know much about the language or anything of the language. They have to mimic the teachers or the tape and slowly build competence in the target language by this rote learning. But rote learning may create the illusion of satisfying a false learner's expectation of being able to say something meaningful in the target language, and it's probably damages the learner's prospects of becoming fluent in the target language. So the learner is unable to produce any real meaningful language. But if teacher decide to encourage learners to speak in the target language immediately, it will be triggering the learner, because when learners are forced to speak in the target language before they are ready or before they acquired enough language to do so, they will suffer of cognitive overloading. So ultimately, an insistence on premature production can cause considerable affective problems for the learners. Okay, that's all from me.
Okay, the next material is about learner style. It seems to me that conventional beginners textbooks are strongly biased towards the learning preferences of analytic, studial, left-brain learners at the expense of global, experiential, and right-brain learners. This approach that beginners textbooks take of emphasizing an analytic step-by-step linear method to the learning of linguistic structures is detrimental for two reasons. Firstly, there is a strong body of research which suggests that the majority of EFL or ESL learners are positioned towards the global, experiential, right brain and of the learning style client. Thus, we can infer that the majority of learners are being marginalized by the current set of beginners books. Moreover, perceptual learning style research overwhelmingly suggests that most learners prefer kinesthetic input over auditory and visual forms of language input. None of the beginners course books I have seen accommodate this type of learners, however. And all the input is mostly auditory, with few clues to meaning, or visual with very short snippets or written text. Catering for kinesthetic learners will involve learners experiencing and interacting with the language through physical action rather than memorizing and analyzing the language. And then secondly, research evidence also suggests that the ability of students to employ multiple learning style results in greater classroom success. And concluding overall, that emphasizing a particular style of learning is not the most effective approach. Okay, let's continue the material about course book sales. The commercial book must good at clearly presenting essential vocabulary and simple linguistic structure, as well as providing user-friendly lessons and progressions. And the commercial books should valuable teaching tools and are successful but clearly cater for one style of learning and teaching. By providing an alternative style of course book, publisher could not only capture a market made up of teachers who are willing to experiment and who are tired of the conventional, but teachers, students, and institutions will also be encouraged to buy more materials. The established course books will continue to be purchased alongside books that provide different content matter and an alternative pedagogy, and that these books would be used to supplement each other is as.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Yunia. Today I will explain about a change of approach the primary. So, problem of EFL managers course book is their obsession with immediate language production and its associated cognitive and affective issues for language learners. So, common sense would dictate that the immediate objective of any manager's language course should be the development of learners' language competence via a comprehension approach to learning. So, comprehension approach to language learning are based on the premise that comprehensional fluency will develop as the result of learning to understand a language. According to Winit 1000 1981 persuasively argues for a non-linear approach to language learning, that takes the position that the interrelationship among components of grammatical system are complex and great in number. Exclusion of particular grammatical elements requires us understanding of many, often distantly related structure. So he reasoned that a particular grammatical element cannot be acquired until a large part of the grammar of the language is understood. This truth seemingly evident to most language teachers and successful learners. Is it contrast to the learner system adopted by conventional EFL textbook, which bases the master in production for each unit of language presented. Language instruction, graded in a comprehension approach, if done successfully, can avoid the problems of overloading and stress often in pulpit and conventional beginner-level textbooks. So, furthermore, a comprehension approach to learning is inherently non-linear and depending on how is it practiced, would settle for a majority of learners if that it provides a global experiential basis to learning. Since the mid-1180s, a number of US university ESL programs have adopted an approach called vocal skill. According to Hastings, for an explanation and assessment of the vocal skill approach, so the basic principle of this approach is that learners are exposed to comprehensible input with no production requirements until they are ready to go to a reading program and then reading. So oral production is broken in gradually and is not prose. Typically in this program, a learner who is taught as a beginner spends at least 3 months just being exposed to language mastery produced by their teacher before they see and written text or are required to speak. So next material, an aging methodology for new materials. So total cycle response, which has been around for over 30 years now, according to Ether 1977 and Larson Freeman for a detailed explanation of TPR methods and technique, is a learning method grounded in a comprehension approach, and there have been many reported successful learning outcomes with the use of TPR, according to Asher 1969 and 1981 by Tomlinson, but it last pilot to make into mainstream coursebook or classroom. So, next, there is little studial work done in the way of writing or analysis. A typical TPR class following exercise model consists of the teacher giving instruction initially only using the imperative form of verbs. For the learners to carry out TPR could start with the simple commands such as stand up, sit down, and walk, then grade usually move on to commands such as and stand up. So, according to Ether 1977, so points out this method is successful because it caters for the majority of learners who seem to be kinesthetic in their prepared, so perceptual learning style, as well as global and experiential in their general style. This are that is kinesthetic, global, and what are known as right brain learning provides right hemisphere, TPR. Then experiential learning are processed in the mic seem to be the answer for my complaints about conventional beginner textbook. So, however, it is only part of the answer. Although IFICA does address the problems of cognitive overloading, linear progression, and only catering for analytic learners and its associated affective issues, it does not cater for learners who do have a prepared analytical learning style known for the medical side global learners. After all, none of this style category is absurd, rather they are extreme of different kinds on which all learners fall somewhere between the extreme. It is also worth remembering that learners adaptively benefit from style stretching. According to Reid 1987, learning through style that are necessarily their own preferred dominant style. That's all for my material. Thank you.
Total Cycle Response, or TPR, is a teaching method based on the idea that a new language can be learned through active actions and that movement can help students learn and understand. This combination of skill allows the student to assimilate information and skill at a rapid rate. Tomlinson, 1994, developed a shared TPR method into a more complete framework, which he calls TPR Plus. A class using the TPR Plus approach always includes TPR pace. The objective will be to provide a relaxed, comprehensible base for other activities in lessons. In Tomlinson model, the TPR pace is not restricted to teacher comments directing students to perform action. It also involves dramatization of stories taught by the teacher, playing of games, painting of murals instructed by the teacher, and searches for hidden bounty, kind of extension of the TPR type activity. So, an example of alternative materials, a course book such as Head Start, Atlas, and New Interchange in both thematic content and approach. Although this material includes speaking activities and attention to linguistic and phonological form at the request of the publisher, the compromise is achieved in a way that still encourages learners to make an affective investment in their language while catering to the global. Right, the hemisphere of language learners, their learning while global, right hemisphere of language learners, as well as the analytical left atmosphere. Okay, I think that's all. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All the presentation of our group. Thank you for your attention. The last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.